The day a galactic prince challenged a human to a duel and learned what true strength was. Looking back now, I suppose my arrogance was inevitable. When you grow up as the crown prince of the Centaurian Empire, with golden scales that shimmer like the twin suns of our homeworld, and strength that could crush titanium like paper, humility isn't exactly a natural trait. Prince Kalarix, my attendant, announced, adjusting the ceremonial cape draped over my broad shoulders. The Grand Summit delegates await your presence. I stood before the quantum glass mirror in my private chamber aboard Space Station Aurora, admiring how the ambient lighting caught each of my perfectly polished scales. 7 feet of pure Centaurian nobility, trained in 13 forms of combat, victor of 27 ritual challenges. My battle record was as pristine as my legendary appearance. The Space Station Aurora hung like a jeweled pendant against the backdrop of the Milky Way, its crystalline spires and elegant architecture representing the pinnacle of cooperative achievement among the Galactic Council races. Representatives from 100 different species had gathered here for the Grand Intergalactic Summit, all of them knowing full well that the Centaurian Empire held the true power in these chambers. The humans have sent a new delegation this year, my attendant mentioned casually, but I noted the slight tremor in his voice. They're requesting equal voting rights in the council. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound resonating through my chamber. Equal voting rights. These primitive beings who had barely mastered faster than light travel, who still resided primarily on their singular homeworld. The very notion was absurd. Let them ask, I replied, flexing my claws. Each one could pierce battle-grade armor, a fact I had demonstrated numerous times in the ritual combat arena. The council knows better than to elevate a species that has yet to prove its worth. As I strode through the station's grand corridors, other delegates parted before me like cosmic dust before a solar wind. My reputation preceded me everywhere I went. Last solar cycle, I had defeated the champion of the Regelian Dominion in single combat. The cycle before that, I had bested 3 Andromedan war masters simultaneously. My combat prowess was the stuff of legends, whispered about in every corner of the galaxy. The summit chamber doors loomed ahead, their surfaces etched with the history of 1,000 years of galactic cooperation, or, more accurately, 1,000 years of the stronger species guiding the lesser ones. That was the natural order of things, after all. Those with power lead, those without follow. What I didn't realize then, what none of us truly understood, was that power comes in many forms. And sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the sharpest claws or the strongest armor. Sometimes they're the ones who make you laugh at their seeming weakness, right before they show you what true strength means. The diplomatic dinner began like any other, with the usual pomp and ceremony that accompanied such gatherings. The station's grand dining hall sparkled with crystalline chandeliers, their light reflecting off my scales in a display that usually commanded attention from every species present. Usually. But tonight something was different. The human delegate, Alexandra Stone, sat at her assigned place, completely unfazed by my presence. She wore what I learned was called a dress uniform, a simple black and gold arrangement that looked practically primitive compared to my ceremonial armor. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe style that exposed a face which seemed to be permanently set in an expression of mild amusement. The Centaurian Empire's combat trials are legendary throughout the galaxy, I announced to the assembled dignitaries, as was customary during these functions. No warrior has ever matched our prowess in ritual combat. That's when it happened. A sound that would change everything, a snort of laughter, quickly stifled but unmistakable, coming from the human section of the table. The dining hall fell silent. Even the Andromedans, normally chattery during meals, stopped their subsonic humming. Every eye, optical sensor, and sensory apparatus turned toward Alexandra Stone, who was trying and failing to maintain a neutral expression. "You find something amusing, human delegate?" I asked, my voice carrying that dangerous edge that usually sent lesser species scrambling for cover. She cleared her throat, straightening in her chair. "My apologies, Your Highness. I meant no disrespect. It's just that, well, ritual combat seems like such an inefficient way to measure true strength." More silence. The Regelian ambassador nearly choked on his plasma wine. Inefficient, I stood to my full height, my ceremonial cape billowing behind me. Perhaps humans prefer to measure strength through their primitive sports, or perhaps through those amusing entertainment videos you call action movies. This time she didn't try to hide her laughter. "No, Your Highness. We measure strength through survival, through adaptation, through our ability to overcome any challenge, not just the ones we're prepared for." The dining hall erupted in nervous murmurs. No one spoke to a Centaurian prince this way, especially not a representative from an unproven species seeking council membership. "Would you care to demonstrate this superior human strength?" I asked, my claws clicking against my crystalline goblet. "Or do you prefer to hide behind clever words?" Alexandra Stone stood, and for the first time I noticed something in her eyes that I hadn't expected. Not fear, not awe, but a kind of predatory anticipation that reminded me, uncomfortably, of our own warrior ancestors. "I would be honored to demonstrate, Your Highness," she replied, her voice carrying a note of challenge that made my scales bristle. "Though I should warn you, humans have a rather unexpected approach to demonstrations of strength." "Then let us make this interesting," I declared, my pride demanding satisfaction. "A formal challenge under council observation. Unless, of course, you wish to withdraw your amusement at our combat traditions." She smiled then, an expression that somehow managed to be both respectful and mocking. "I accept your challenge, Prince Kalarix. Though I suspect this may not go quite the way you're expecting." The gathered delegates gasped collectively. Even my own attendants shifted nervously. No one had accepted a formal challenge from a Centaurian royal in over 50 cycles. The last being who tried had ended up as a cautionary tale taught to diplomatic academy students. But Alexandra Stone just calmly raised her glass in a human gesture called a toast and said, "To unexpected lessons in strength." I had no idea then just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The station's central amphitheater pulsed with energy as thousands of delegates gathered for the formal challenge declaration. Protocol demanded that such events be conducted with proper ceremony, another tradition humans probably found amusing, but one they would have to respect. I stood on the ceremonial platform, my golden scales now adorned with the red markings of challenge. The ancient symbols had been applied by our highest-ranking priest aboard the station, each one representing a different aspect of combat honor, strength, victory, and destiny. Attention, citizens of the Galactic Council! The station's AI broadcast echoed through every corridor and chamber. A formal challenge has been issued under Article 7 of the Centaurian Combat Code. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. The Arcturian delegation's crystalline forms vibrated with excitement, creating a harmonic hum that resonated through the chamber. The vegan diplomatic corps had activated their recording appendages, ensuring every moment would be preserved for their historical archives. Prince Kalarix of the Centaurian Empire challenges human delegate Alexandra Stone to ritual combat. The announcement continued. "The challenge has been accepted. The combat will commence in exactly one planetary rotation." Alexandra Stone stood on her designated platform, still wearing that insufferable half-smile. The human delegation behind her looked remarkably calm, which only served to irritate me further. Didn't they understand the gravity of this situation? "The human challenger has selected a Grade 0 weapon, traditional steel sword, Terra Origin," the AI announced, sounding almost confused. "This selection is valid under ancient laws." "The terms of combat are as follows," I proclaimed, my voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. 3 trials of strength, chosen by mutual agreement. Victory must be absolute and acknowledged by both parties. The council shall bear witness, and their judgment shall be final. The Andromedans buzzed with disapproval. They had always preferred diplomatic solutions. The Rigelian ambassador was already taking bets, their species' infamous gambling instincts impossible to suppress even during formal proceedings. "Does the challenged party understand and accept these terms?" the council elder asked, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like 1,000 stars. "I understand and accept," Alexandra replied, her voice clear and unwavering. "Though I request one addition to the traditional terms." More murmurs, more disapproving buzzes. Modifications to ritual combat terms were rare and often seen as disrespectful. "The human delegate may speak," I granted, curious despite my irritation. "I propose that the victor must not only win the trials but explain what they have learned from them. After all, combat without understanding is just violence, isn't it?" The chamber erupted in a cacophony of reactions. The Pleiadian observers began their characteristic glow pulsing of approval, while the Syrian delegation's fur bristled with indignation at such a modification to ancient custom. But I found myself intrigued. This human had managed to challenge not just me, but the very nature of our combat traditions, all while maintaining perfect diplomatic courtesy. "The terms are accepted," I declared, causing another wave of shocked reactions. "Tomorrow, Alexandra Stone, you will learn the true meaning of Centaurian strength, and perhaps we will all learn something more." As the crowd dispersed, I caught her eye across the chamber. She nodded just once, and in that gesture I sensed something I had never expected to find in a human: the heart of a true warrior. The preparation chambers in Space Station Aurora were designed to accommodate warriors from every known species in the galaxy. My own chamber, naturally, was the grandest, a vast space filled with training equipment that could withstand the full force of Centaurian strength. I began my preparations as I had been taught since hatching. First, the ritual of awakening 3 hours of progressive resistance training against gravity plates set to crush a small moon. My scales gleamed with exertion as I pushed against forces that would reduce most species to paste. "Your Highness," my combat instructor, Master Thex, observed from the chamber's edge. "Your form is perfect, but your mind seems distracted." He wasn't wrong. Through the chamber's quantum glass walls, I could see into the human's preparation area, and what I saw made absolutely no sense. Alexandra Stone was sleeping, just lying there on a simple cushioned surface, completely still except for the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. How could she waste precious preparation time on unconsciousness? "The human shows no respect for combat traditions," I growled, increasing the gravity load another 1,000 units. "This mockery will not stand." But as the hours passed, her behavior became even more baffling. When she finally woke, she spent time in quiet conversation with her team, occasionally laughing. Then she engaged in what appeared to be elementary calisthenics movements so basic that we taught them to Centaurian children. The station's betting pools were going wild. The Rigelian odds makers had me favored to win by margins so large they had to invent new mathematical notations. The Andromedan diplomatic corps had already drafted sympathy messages to the human delegation. I continued my preparations, moving through the ancient combat forms with precision and power. The chamber of trials rang with the sounds of my exertion: the crack of braking practice drones, the hiss of hydraulic resistance units struggling to match my strength. "She's watching you now," Your Highness, Master Thex noted during a brief rest period. I turned to see Alexandra standing at her chamber's window, that same calculating look in her eyes. She held what appeared to be a cup of hot liquid coffee. I later learned it was called. She raised it in my direction, nodded, and went back to her incomprehensible preparation routine. The station's tension grew thicker as the hours counted down. Maintenance crews had to adjust the atmospheric processors 3 times to handle the collective anxiety of thousands of delegates. The betting pools had grown so large that the station's economic AI had to create a separate processing unit just to handle the transactions. As the final hour approached, I completed the ritual of focus, a meditation technique passed down through generations of Centaurian warriors. My scales now bore the full ceremonial markings of combat, and my muscles were primed for battle. My next series of attacks came from pure instinct, centuries of training taking over. The Starfire saber became a web of burning light, each strike capable of sundering battleships. Jack's responses were economical, almost lazy. He never blocked when he could dodge, never struck when he could simply not be where my blade was. Through it all, Alexandra Stone maintained an air of casual readiness that I found increasingly unsettling. She had changed into what she called workout clothes, simple garments that seemed wholly inadequate for serious combat. Prince Kalarix, Master Thex, said softly, "I must warn you. There is something unusual about this human's preparation." "What do you mean?" I asked, my attention caught by his tone. "She is not preparing for a fight," he said, his ancient eyes narrowing. "She is preparing for something else entirely, something we may not understand." I dismissed his concerns with a wave of my clawed hand. What could this human possibly know about combat that the Centaurian Empire had not mastered over millennia of warrior tradition? The station's announcement system chimed, signaling the approach of combat time. As I made my way to the arena, I caught one final glimpse of Alexandra Stone. She was smiling again, but this time, the expression sent an unfamiliar sensation down my armored spine. For the first time in my combat career, I felt something that might have been doubt. The combat arena aboard Space Station Aurora was a technological marvel, designed to adapt to any form of combat from any known species. Today, its quantum fields shimmered with anticipation as thousands of spectators filled the observation rings above. "The first trial shall be the test of strength," announced the council elder, their voice resonating through the arena. "Direct physical combat, no weapons, no technological assistance." I stepped into the combat circle, my scales catching the light dramatically. This would be over quickly. No human could match Centaurian physical strength. Alexandra Stone entered from the opposite side, still wearing that simple outfit, still looking frustratingly calm. "Begin." Jack's smile widened. "Now we're getting somewhere." The Starfire Saber's ultimate configuration filled the arena with the light of a newborn star. As the superheated blade carved patterns of plasma through the air, my mind flashed back to my first championship match, 3 centuries ago. My opponent then, a quantum blade master from the Andromeda Core, had said something that only now began to make sense. I lunged forward with the speed that had made me legendary, claws extended for a quick submission hold. Alexandra didn't move until the last possible second. Then, somehow, she wasn't where she should have been. My claws met empty air as she rolled beneath my strike, using my own momentum to send me stumbling forward. The crowd gasped. I recovered quickly, but the damage to my dignity was done. "Interesting evasion technique," I growled, circling her carefully now. "But you cannot win by merely avoiding combat." "Who said anything about avoiding?" she replied, and then did something completely unexpected. She charged directly at me. What followed was unlike any combat I had ever experienced. Every time I thought I had her pinned, she would flow away like water. When I expected her to retreat, she would advance. Her movements made no sense according to any combat form I knew until I realized she was using my own strength against me, letting my powerful strikes drain my energy while she remained fresh. The first round ended in a draw unprecedented in Centaurian challenge history. "The second trial shall be the test of endurance," the elder announced. "Competitors will maintain their position within the gravity well until one yields." Now this would be my victory. The gravity well could be increased to crush a small starship. I took my position, confident. Alexandra stood opposite me as the gravity began to increase. 1 hour passed. Then 2. The gravity reached levels that would reduce most species to quantum particles. Alexandra was sweating heavily, her muscles trembling, but she remained standing. More incredibly, she was talking. "Stop talking and fight," I roared, pushing the Starfire Saber beyond its safety limits. The blade's containment field began to waver, threatening to unleash the power of a solar flare. "You know what humans call this?" she gasped out. "Tuesday at the gym. Though, I have to admit, the gravity's a nice touch." Jack's response was to lower his sword slightly, intentionally creating an opening in his defense. "Make me." 3 hours. 4. My own scales were aching, but I maintained my proud stance. The human's legs were shaking visibly now, but her eyes showed no defeat. If anything, they showed excitement. "The thing about humans," she continued, her voice strained but clear, "is that we evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. Gravity is just another challenge to overcome." 5 hours. The arena's power systems were straining to maintain the gravity field. Neither of us had moved an inch. The elder was forced to declare another draw. "The final trial shall be the test of adaptation," came the announcement. "The arena will present random environmental challenges. Competitors must survive and thrive." This was where my superior Centaurian capabilities would finally prove decisive. Our species could survive in virtually any environment. The arena shifted, becoming a frozen wasteland. I activated my internal heating, comfortable in the cold. Alexandra simply started moving, performing what she later called jumping jacks to keep warm. The environment changed to crushing ocean depths. My scales provided natural pressure protection. She adjusted her breathing technique and kept swimming. Burning desert, toxic atmosphere. 0 gravity. With each change, I expected her to falter. Instead, she adapted using minimal energy, always moving, always thinking. Then I understood. Humans hadn't evolved to be the strongest, or the fastest, or the most naturally protected. They had evolved to adapt to anything, to survive everything, to keep going when any sensible species would have given up. The final change brought us to a simulated high-gravity planet with thin atmosphere and extreme temperatures. I was prepared to endure it with my natural abilities. Alexandra looked around, analyzed the situation, and did something completely unexpected. She sat down. The next sequence defied description. Our blades met in a dance of steel on steel, each clash sending sparks cascading through the arena. Without my technological advantages, without the predictive systems and quantum fields, I found myself fighting purely on instinct. And for the first time in centuries, I felt truly alive. "What are you doing?" I demanded, struggling to maintain my dignified stance against the conditions. "You were holding back," I accused between strikes, recognizing patterns that no beginner could know. "Conserving energy," she replied calmly. "In survival situations, sometimes the best approach is to do less, not more. Your turn, Your Highness." I stared at her, suddenly understanding what my combat master had tried to warn me about. This human hadn't prepared for combat, she had prepared for survival. Every move she had made, from her seemingly lazy preparation to her tactical choices, had been about efficient adaptation rather than brute force. And in that moment, as my muscles screamed from maintaining my superior posture, while she calmly sat conserving her strength, I learned what true strength really meant. The declaration of a draw in a Centaurian ritual combat was unprecedented in our 1,000-year history. The station's administrative AI nearly crashed trying to process all the betting implications, but that was hardly the most significant outcome of our duel. I found Alexandra in the recovery chamber, calmly pressing a cold pack against her shoulder. She started to stand when I entered, but I waved away the formality. "Please, remain seated. You have more than earned the right to rest," I said, my voice carrying a new note of respect that surprised even me. "Though I must ask, why did you laugh that first night at dinner?" She smiled, but this time there was no mockery in it. Because where humans come from, strength isn't about being the best at everything. It's about knowing when to fight, when to adapt, and when to simply endure. Your combat trials were impressive, but they only tested one kind of strength. The truth of her words resonated with something deep in my warrior heritage. Our ancient texts spoke of wisdom in combat, but somewhere along the way, we had forgotten that wisdom meant more than knowing how to fight. The Centaurian Empire hereby formally supports humanity's petition for full council membership, I announced, causing several observing diplomats to drop their datapads in shock. "That's quite a change of heart," Your Highness, Alexandra noted, raising an eyebrow. "Are you sure your advisors will approve?" "My advisors did not just spend 5 hours failing to defeat someone half their size in ritual combat," I replied, surprising myself with a laugh. "Besides, the galaxy could benefit from a species that approaches problems differently." "Thank you for the match," he said, bowing slightly. "Your ancestors' blade, its balance is exquisite. Perhaps next time we could start with those, skip the light show entirely." The news spread through the station faster than a quantum transmission. The Rigelian betting syndicates were in chaos. The Andromedans had already begun composing a new harmony to commemorate the historic event. The vegan archives were working overtime to document every detail. But the real changes were just beginning. Within days, human diplomatic teams were consulting with various species on survival strategies for hostile environments. Centaurian warriors began incorporating human adaptability training into their combat programs. The station's recreational facility had to be expanded to accommodate the sudden interest in human exercise techniques. Your Highness, Alexandra said, catching up with me in the diplomatic quarter a few days later. I hear you've been spending time in the station's historical archives. I nodded, my scales shifting in what I now recognized as embarrassment. I found records of early human history. Your species faced extinction-level events multiple times, yet you survived through, what did you call it? Sheer stubbornness, she suggested with a grin. That, and learning to work together. Speaking of which, the human delegation is hosting what we call a barbecue tonight. Would you care to join us? A diplomatic dinner, I asked, already familiar with such formal events. No, just people sharing food and stories. Sometimes the strongest bonds are formed over simple things. As I watched various species attempting to navigate human social customs that evening, I realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability in combat or their physical endurance. It was their ability to turn enemies into friends, to find common ground in uncommon places, and to face the unknown with both determination and humor. The council meeting the next day was unlike any in galactic history. Species that had been rivals for centuries found themselves united in support of human membership. Not because humans were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they brought something unique to our galactic community: the strength to change, to grow, and to bring others along with them. "You know," I said to Alexandra as we watched the unanimous vote in favor of human membership, "I still haven't fulfilled the terms of our combat agreement." I was supposed to explain what I learned. "And what did you learn, Your Highness?" "That true strength isn't about being undefeated," I replied, looking at the assembled delegates. "It's about being unafraid to fail, to adapt, and to change. Now, 3 cycles later, the galaxy is a very different place. Humans have become integral members of the Council, their unconventional approaches bringing fresh perspectives to age-old challenges. The Centaurian Empire has undergone its own transformation, our warriors now known as much for their adaptability as their strength. As for me, I still maintain my combat training, but I've added what humans call yoga to my routine." Master Thex was skeptical at first, but even he had to admit that flexibility of body and mind go hand in hand. The most surprising change? The station's annual combat tournaments now include a new event called Creative Problem Solving. Last cycle's winner was a Regelian who defeated a vegan battlemaster by telling jokes until their opponent's crystalline structure vibrated with laughter, and they had to withdraw. Alexandra and I meet regularly for what she calls coffee and combat practice. She still laughs at my formal mannerisms, and I still pretend to be offended. But we both know that the greatest victories often come disguised as defeats. Though I do have one small complaint: ever since humans joined the Council, the galaxy has become significantly noisier. It seems every species now thinks they can just speak their mind. But perhaps that's not such a bad thing. After all, true strength lies not in the power to silence others, but in the wisdom to listen when they laugh.